You make more money than your parents did at your age. Not a little more, meaningfully more. The kind of number that, if you said it out loud to your parents at 25, they probably would have felt relieved for you, maybe even proud. And yet, you check your bank account on a Tuesday night and something feels wrong. Not dramatic wrong, not crisis wrong, just a quiet, persistent wrong. Like a sound you can't quite locate in a room. You're not behind on anything. The bills are paid, you showed up to work, you did the things. And still, at the end of the month, the number left over is smaller than it should be. Smaller than it feels like it should be for someone who earns what you earn. So you do what most people do. You run the mental audit. The coffee, the subscriptions, the dinner out last weekend. You look for the leak. You tell yourself it's a discipline problem, a focus problem, a you problem. But here's the thing. You've been running that audit for years now, and the answer never quite adds up. Because the truth isn't hiding in your spending habits. The truth is hiding in the structure of the world you were handed. Your parents didn't just earn less than you, they lived inside a completely different financial system. One where the same effort, the same paycheck, the same reasonable life produced a fundamentally different result. And no one officially told you that system changed. That's what this video is about. Not your habits, not your choices, the system itself. Let's go back, not to romanticize it, not to say everything was better, just to look at the structure honestly. When your parents entered the workforce, the relationship between income and the cost of a stable life was fundamentally different. Not slightly different, structurally different. A single income could buy a house in a reasonable area, not a mansion, not a postcard property, just a house. A normal house, in a normal neighborhood where normal people lived. The mortgage payment on that house was a manageable slice of one person's monthly take-home pay. College, if they went, cost a fraction of what it costs today even after you adjust for inflation. Many people paid for it while working part-time. Some paid it off within a few years of graduating. The degree didn't come with a decade of financial damage attached to it. Health insurance, if it came with the job, largely came with the job. Retirement, in many cases, was a defined pension. Something guaranteed, something the employer carried, not a personal investment account that lives and dies on market timing and your own financial literacy, and perhaps most importantly, the gap between earning a basic income and accessing a stable life was narrow enough to cross. You didn't need to be exceptional. You didn't need two incomes, a side hustle, a financial strategy, and a decade of perfect decisions just to reach the starting line. You just needed a job, a real one, and some time. That world didn't require optimization to survive it. Now think about what your world requires just to stay level. The job is not enough anymore. One income is not enough. Doing everything right is sometimes still not enough. That's not a personal failure. That's a structural shift. And it happened gradually, quietly, and without a formal announcement. Here is where it gets interesting. If you look at the raw numbers, wages have gone up. Technically, people today earn more than people earned 30 years ago. The data says so. Official reports say so. And whenever you bring up the feeling of falling behind, someone will eventually point to those numbers and tell you that you're doing fine. But those numbers are telling you the price of the ticket went up. They are not telling you what the ticket used to get you. Think about houses. In the early 1980s, the average home cost roughly 2 to 3 times the average annual salary. Today, that number is closer to 6, 7, or 8 times, and in major cities, it goes well beyond that. Your salary went up, but the asset you are trying to buy with that salary went up faster, much faster. Think about rent. A generation ago, the general guidance was that housing should cost around 25% of your income. For millions of people today, rent alone is consuming 35, 40, even 50% of their monthly take-home pay before anything else is touched. Think about education. The cost of a 4-year degree has increased by over 180% in real terms since the 1980s. The salary waiting at the end of that degree has not kept the same pace. Think about childcare, health insurance, the cost of simply maintaining a car to get to the job that pays the salary that still isn't enough. Each of these costs didn't just rise with inflation, they outran it. So yes, your paycheck is nominally bigger than your parents' was. But the things that paycheck needs to cover have grown at a completely different speed. You are not imagining the gap. The gap is real. It is measurable. And it was not caused by your latte. So, here is the mechanism. Here is the part that nobody puts on a financial planning poster. Every time your income goes up, the system around you adjusts. Not because someone planned it that way in a room somewhere, not because there is a villain with a spreadsheet, but because modern life has a structure built into it that expands to meet whatever you earn, quietly, automatically, almost invisibly. Call it the income absorption system. It works like this. You get a raise. Before that raise ever touches your actual choices, a set of fixed costs have already claimed their share. Taxes go up with income. If you move to afford the job that pays more, your rent or mortgage is higher. The neighborhood that matches your income level costs more to live in. The car that gets you to the better job costs more to run. The insurance that covers the life you've built costs more to maintain. And here is the part that makes it feel like a trap. These are not luxury costs. These are entry costs, the basic price of participation in a working, functioning modern life at your income level. You didn't choose extravagance. You chose stability. And stability got expensive. Then add the second layer, lifestyle creep, which sounds like a personal failure but is actually a deeply engineered response. The entire consumer economy is built to ensure that as your income rises, your spending rises with it, not because you are weak or undisciplined. Because thousands of the smartest people in the world are employed full-time to make sure that every new dollar you earn feels like permission to spend slightly more. Better phone, bigger car, nicer apartment, small upgrades that feel earned, that feel reasonable. That feel like the natural result of working hard. And they are reasonable. That is the uncomfortable truth. The problem is not that you upgraded your life. The problem is that the baseline cost of a stable life upgraded itself first without asking. So by the time lifestyle creep arrives, the raise is already gone. The absorption happened before the choice. That is the system. And it runs whether you are watching it or not. Let's make this concrete. Let's put it in a real life. Two people, both working. Combined income that would have sounded extraordinary to their parents. A number that, on paper, should mean comfort, should mean progress, should mean something left over at the end of the month. Here is where that number actually goes. Rent or mortgage first. In most mid-sized cities, that is somewhere between 30 and 45% of take-home pay before anything else moves. If they bought recently, the mortgage reflects current prices, which means it reflects a market that has doubled or tripled since their parents bought their first home. The monthly payment is not a 1990s mortgage, it is a 2020s mortgage, and those are two completely different financial objects. Then, the car, or two cars, because the job is not on a bus route. The suburb that was affordable enough to buy in is not walkable. Getting to work costs money every single month. Insurance, fuel, maintenance, registration. It adds up quietly. Then childcare. If they have children, and if both people are working, someone has to watch those children while they work. In many parts of the country, full-time childcare for one child costs more per month than a mortgage payment did 20 years ago. This is not an exaggeration. It is a current, documented reality. Then the student loans. The degrees that were supposed to unlock the income that was supposed to unlock the life. Still being paid. Years later, sometimes a decade later. Then insurance. Health coverage, increasingly expensive even with employer contributions. Life insurance. Home insurance. Then the subscriptions, the utilities, the phone plans, the internet. That is no longer optional because the job requires it. And somewhere at the bottom of that list, after all of that has been claimed, is whatever is left. Which is not much, which is sometimes nothing. And both people in this household are educated, employed, responsible, doing the things. They are not failing. They are running inside a cost structure that was designed around a world that no longer exists, and they feel it every single month, even if they cannot yet name it. Let's stop talking about money for a moment. Because the most expensive thing this system took from this generation was not dollars, it was not savings rate or net worth or retirement contributions, as real as those losses are. The most expensive thing it took was optionality. Optionality is the ability to choose, the ability to say no to the wrong job because you have enough runway to wait for the right one, the ability to leave a situation that is damaging you because you are not one missed paycheck away from a crisis. The ability to take a risk, start something, move somewhere, try something different, without the whole structure collapsing around you. Your parents had more of it. Not because they were braver, not because they were more entrepreneurial, but because the cost of stability was low enough that income generated surplus, and surplus creates options. When there is no surplus, there are no options. And when there are no options, something quieter and more damaging happens. You start making decisions from fear instead of from choice. You stay in the job that is grinding you down because the alternative is terrifying. You don't negotiate as hard as you should because you cannot afford the gap between jobs. You don't take the risk that might change your life because you are one emergency away from the edge. That is the real cost. Not just the money. The psychological weight of living at full financial extension, of having an income that looks stable from the outside but feels fragile from the inside, of working hard every week and still feeling like you are one bad month away from a problem you cannot solve. There is a word for this feeling. It is not laziness, it is not ingratitude, it is the very specific exhaustion of running fast enough to stay still, and an entire generation is living inside it right now, wondering quietly if it is their fault. It is not, so let's name it clearly. Let's say the thing that the numbers have been trying to say this entire time. The feeling of being poorer is not about how much you earn, it is about the ratio between what you earn and the cost of entry into a stable life. That ratio is the real measure of financial health, not your salary, not your job title, not the number on your payslip, the ratio. And for this generation, that ratio has been quietly, structurally broken in a way that no pay rise has been able to fix. Think of it this way. Imagine a ladder. Your parents' generation grabbed the bottom rung when it was 3 feet off the ground. It took effort. It required work. But it was reachable. You could jump for it. You could grab it and start climbing. That same rung is now 8 feet off the ground. You are not shorter. You are not weaker. You are not less willing to jump. The rung moved, and the most insidious part of this is that the system never officially acknowledged the move. The advice stayed the same. Work hard, save money, be responsible, buy a home, build a life. The instructions didn't update when the conditions changed. So an entire generation followed the instructions faithfully and arrived at the destination to find that the promised outcome was no longer included. The job was supposed to lead to savings. The savings were supposed to lead to a home. The home was supposed to lead to stability. The stability was supposed to lead to freedom. That change still exists in the brochure. It just doesn't reliably work anymore, and the gap between the brochure and the reality is exactly where the feeling lives. That specific, unresolvable feeling of doing everything right and still ending up somewhere that doesn't feel right. You are not imagining it. The rung moved. So what do you do with this? Because this video was never really about making you feel worse. It was about making you see more clearly. And seeing clearly is actually the first thing that changes anything. Here is what changes when you understand the system you are living inside. You stop misdiagnosing the problem. Most people living inside this trap spend enormous amounts of mental energy blaming themselves, the coffee, the habits, the choices, the discipline. They run the personal audit over and over looking for the leak that doesn't exist, and every time the audit comes back inconclusive, they conclude that the problem must be something invisible about themselves, some character flaw they can't quite identify. When you understand that the cost structure itself has shifted, you stop looking for a personal explanation for a structural problem. That matters more than it sounds, because a person who correctly identifies the problem can start making decisions that actually address it. A person who misidentifies the problem keeps applying the wrong solution and wondering why nothing improves. The second thing that changes is how you measure progress. In a broken ratio environment, traditional financial milestones stop being useful benchmarks. Comparing yourself to where your parents were at your age is not a fair comparison. It is not the same race on the same track. It is a different race on a harder track with fewer of the same shortcuts available. Understanding that doesn't remove the difficulty. But it removes the false shame attached to the difficulty. And false shame is one of the most expensive things you can carry because it drains the energy you need to actually navigate the situation you are in. The third thing that changes is where you direct your attention. Once you see the income absorption system clearly, you can start to think differently about the edges of it, the places where the system has less grip, building assets instead of just earning income. Understanding the difference between costs that are truly fixed and costs that feel fixed but aren't. Recognizing that the traditional path, earn more, spend proportionally more, repeat, is the mechanism of the trap itself, and that the exit, if there is one, runs perpendicular to that path, not along it. None of this is easy. None of this is a clean solution wrapped in 3 steps. But here is what is true. The generation that understands the system it is living inside is not the same as the generation that doesn't. One of them is running hard with no idea why the finish line keeps moving. The other one has stopped, looked up, and finally seen the track for what it is. You just became the second one, and that is not nothing. That is, quietly, everything.